Who here uses the wine app Vivino? Well, I don't really, but according to their website, 65,957,761 people do, and they've logged close to 100 million reviews for 17 million wines. So in order to find great wines for less than $30, I've asked my team to search the app for highly rated wines that are widely available. They distilled 100 million reviews down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wines that I'm going to taste and review for you. And no, this video is not sponsored by Vivino, so you get the usual 100% unbiased review of their selection. So let's go. Except for the occasional outburst in decadency, most of the wines I drink at home are below $30. I think you can find great wines with lots of intensity, complexity, and depth in that price category. The prices for the wines in this tasting vary depending on your market, so I've added all of the wines in the description below this video, and I've also added wine searcher links for all of the wines, so you can look up the price in your market using Wine Searcher. But now, without much further ado, let's start with the first wine. This is the Cave de Lugny Cremant de Bourgogne Rosé Brut, and it received a rating of 4.0 out of 5 stars. Cremant de Bourgogne can be a great value as it's often made in a similar way as Champagne using the same grape varieties. In this case, they've used Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, which are also very common in Champagne, but they've added also Gamay, which is a grape variety and that is not allowed up there. I believe Cave de Lugny is a pretty big producer. They've been very strong on the export market, so they should be available in many different places. This wine retails for around $15. But now let's pop that cork. So the foam disappears quite quickly and there's not too much CO2 in this wine. It smells very fruit driven. There's quite a lot of peach and strawberry flavor coming from the glass. So it's not necessarily a wine with great depth. They are saying that the wine stays on the lees for 14 months instead of the legally required 9 months, but it actually doesn't really smell a lot of lees, of the yeasty notes that you get from the dead yeast cells. Sometimes it smells like brioche, sometimes it smells like croissant, but in this case it's more fruit driven really. On the palate it's also quite light and juicy. I think this is a sparkling wine that many people would enjoy. It is more fruit driven, more juicy and really polished. So I think this is something for a wide audience. Oftentimes you need something for a reception when you invite people over or have a big party. And this is certainly something that lots of people would just drink, but it's not very deep in my opinion. So I'm going to rate this 85 points. I think it's good to very good, but there's not much more there. It's a juicy rosé sparkling wine, but you could find many different wines in that same category at a very similar price point, I might add. The next wine is the 2022 Albarino Reserva from Garzon in Uruguay. And I'm quite excited to taste this wine. There are 2 reasons for that. First of all, I really like Albarino, so I tend to like tasting these wines anyways. And the second reason is I've been to Garzon a few years ago and I really enjoyed my stay there. The winery is absolutely beautiful. It's a pretty big producer, but they are also producing really high-end wines. I don't remember tasting their Albarino when I was there on my visit, but I might have. I've tasted a lot of wines. Uruguay is a very interesting winemaking country. It's fairly small, but it's very beautiful. And they are producing some really exciting wines out of grape varieties from Southern Europe. I don't really know why they call this wine a Reserva. I think there are no legal implications associated with that term in Uruguay. And the wine only stayed for 3 to 6 months on the lease, so it's not really a Reserva. It was rated 4.0 stars out of 5, so it has a fairly high rating. on Vivino, but is it any good? So the wine smells of green apple, green pear, a little bit of walnuts. So it's kind of typical Albarino in flavor. On the palate, it's actually quite juicy and light. There's good freshness there, good balance, but not a lot of depth. I think this is a really good wine. It's light, fresh, and crisp. And if I would eat a fish dish like fresh cod and chips, for example, I'd love that wine, but I think it's not extraordinary. I would rate it 86 points, and at $20 it's okay, but I'm pretty sure I'd find better Albarino than this. The next one is the 2018 Loic Mahe Savennières Sables et Schistes from the Loire in France, and this was rated 4.1 stars on Vivino. This is 100% Chenin Blanc, and I really like this grape variety. This didn't see any oak as far as I know. It was aged in fiberglass tanks, and well, let's open it. This wine is organic, and they actually put the age worthiness on the back label. It says Garde, which means like ageability, 7 to 8 years. So this should still be very young. So to all those people out there who think light white wines need to be consumed right away once they're bottled, you're wrong. Well, in most cases, in most cases you're right. In those cases you're wrong. So this is quite delicious. It smells of lemon zest, a little bit waxy. There's green apple flavor coming through as well, a little bit of bruised apple. On the palate it's actually rich and at the same time very fresh and vibrant. The acidity is just slicing through my tongue, which sounds terrible, but it actually feels pretty good. You know, Chenin can be really rich and concentrated and at the same time very fresh and vibrant, and this wine has exactly that. I think this is really, really delicious and quite a big step up compared to the previous wines. I'd actually rate this 91 points. I think this is delicious. It's pretty much at the same price point as the previous wine. Similar rating on Vivino, but not in my book. You know what? Actually, I'm going 1 point down. I think in the finish, it could be a little bit crisper, a little bit more balanced. It feels a little flabby. I mean, it's still a very, very nice wine on the palate, but it could be just a tick better. So next up, we have a wine from Portugal, the 2019 Lavradores de Feitoria Três Bagos Reserva from the Douro Valley. So this is a cuvée of the red grape varieties Tinta Ruiz, Touriga Nacional and Touriga Franca. And yeah, it seems to be pretty good because it was rated 4.3 stars on Vivino. But let's see whether it's actually that good. This is a project where 16 wineries, I think, are involved. So it's a fairly large scale production. And this wine was fermented in stainless steel and then aged in stainless steel and in new and used barriques. All right, the first red, and this is one of those wines, if I only get one stain on my shirt, then I can throw it away. Portugal is still one of the best countries when it comes to the quality-price ratio. There are some amazing wines coming out of Portugal that still are really, really affordable. So let's hope this is one of them. So this is really dark in color. The core is black. You can't really see your fingers through the glass. On the nose, there's lots of fruit flavor, blackberry, cassis, dark fruit flavors. There's not too much oak coming from the glass. There's a little bit of chocolate and smoke aromas coming out of this wine. On the palate, it's actually quite rich, but there's not all that much weight there. I don't think it stays on your palate for long after you drink it. The tannins are a little bit harsh, so it doesn't really have, well, the perfect balance. Let's put it that way. I do think that this is a good red wine, but I don't think it's better than the other ones, even though the Vivino rating is quite a bit higher than for the previous wines. I would rate this 85 points. I think it's pretty good, but it's not really exciting. There's not a lot of depth there. And I've tasted better wines from Douro. Yeah, it's really the tannins that are just quite harsh. I don't like that. Next up, we have another wine from the Iberian Peninsula. It's the 2011 Faustino 1, and it received a rating of 4.0 stars on Vivino. You might have seen this bottle before. It is quite distinctive. It looks terrible in my opinion, but it's certainly very well memorable. The bottle is actually, I mean, there's a purpose for all of this. So the bottle doesn't let light penetrate the wine, so that's good for aging wine for a long time. This cage thing, I learned, was traditionally there in order to protect the wine so that you couldn't just remove the cork and refill the wine with something else. And this label is a Rembrandt portrait, but I haven't quite figured out why Rembrandt was involved in the production of this wine. If anyone knows, let me know down below. So yeah, the bottle looks pretty terrible, but let's see whether the wine tastes better. So this is a cuvée of Tempranillo, Mazzuelo and Graciano, and they themselves say that 30 out of 100 Gran Reserva bottles from Rioja that are being sold around the world are Faustino 1. So the production here must be massive. But yeah, there are some large volume wines that are still pretty good. So yeah, let's give it a chance. The wine was aged for more than 2 years in French and American oak barrels in order to give it a little bit of oxygen, but also some toastiness, some flavor. The wine smells of ripe cherries, chocolate and coconut. It's not super expressive. I don't really think it has Gran Reserva flavors. Usually those wines tend to be a little bit more spicy. The oak flavor tends to be a little bit more pronounced. This is actually more fruit driven. On the palate, it's rich and juicy. The tannins are really polished and there's a good fresh finish. I think this is a pretty good wine considering that it is really cheap, produced in large amounts and has been aged for more than 10 years. I'm going to rate this 88 points. I think it is pretty good at that price point, but it's not really a great Gran Reserva. Next up, we have the 2016 Farnito Carpineto Cabernet Sauvignon IGT from Tuscany, and it got a score of 4.1 stars on Vivino. So this is a super Tuscan wine as it is 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, and it made it into the top 100 list of Wine Spectator multiple times according to my information. So that sounds pretty good, but now let's taste it. So this is 100% Cabernet Sauvignon and it's aged in oak for roughly 1 year, so sounds like a pretty serious wine. The wine smells of blackberries, cassis, smoky oak notes and bread. Bread is a flavor in wine that comes from a certain type of yeast, and it can make the wine smell like a barn or farmyardy. So a little bit like poop. When it is super pronounced, it's not good. But if there's like a touch of it, it can actually make the wine taste a little bit more interesting. But some people just flat out hate this flavor. So for them, this would maybe already be too much. I can handle a little bit of bread. I think sometimes it gives the wine a little bit more complexity. It doesn't make it smell more high end. It feels a little bit more rustic when there's a little bit of bread there. But I like a little bit of rusticity. That's the word. On the palate, it's actually quite grippy. The tannins are intense. Sometimes bread brings out the structure even more because the yeast kind of eat away a little bit of the richness of the wine. So it just feels a little bit more lean and sometimes a little bit too harsh. In this case, there's quite a bit of harshness, grippiness. Cabernet obviously also brings lots of tannins into a wine. So this is, it's not quite perfect. But it is intense and complex and fresh. And I think this is a wine that you should drink together with a steak. I'm going to rate this 90 points. I think there's quite a lot there, but it won't be a wine for everyone. So the last wine in the tasting is also the most expensive one. It's the 2018 Chateau Saint-Michel Cold Creek Vineyard Cabernet Sauvignon from Columbia Valley in Washington State. Chateau Saint-Michel is a pretty big winery in Washington State, producing some extraordinary wines. I think I've tasted a few of their wines on this channel. I've tasted their Rieslings, for example, as they are very big, if not the biggest Riesling producer in the world. And now let's taste the Cabernet. When people hear Washington State, they think of Seattle, which is the biggest city in the state. And Seattle can be really wet. It's quite green. It's close to the coast, to the Pacific coast. It's fairly cold as well. But most of the vineyards are actually further inland. And there it's actually really hot and dry, so you can easily ripen Cabernet Sauvignon in Washington State as long as you're not right at the coast. This is also 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. Usually Cabernet is blended with Merlot, for example, but in this case they just went 100% Cabernet. Oh, I forgot to throw the cork. Messed that up. Now, here you go. I wasn't even close. Okay, this is actually quite delicious. It smells of blackcurrants, blackberries. There's a little bit of mocha, chocolate flavor coming through from the oak aging. There's also a little bit of mintiness on the nose, which is quite delicious. On the palate, it's actually really nicely structured. The tannins are grippy, as the wine is still quite young. There's good freshness there, quite a lot of body and concentration. I mean, this is 15% alcohol, but it doesn't feel alcoholic. It just feels rich and structured. So there's a lot of balance there as well. So I'm going to rate this 92 points. I think it's a pretty delicious wine, and I don't really know why the Vivino crowd only gave it 4.2 stars. It is definitely quite a bit better than all of the other wines. All right, that's it. There were some really interesting wines in this tasting. Nothing really terrible, but what stood out were the Savennières here and the Chateau Saint-Michel Cabernet Sauvignon. But I gotta say, I would drink all of them, basically. I think at that price point, they all performed really well. Even though there were bigger differences in terms of quality, there was nothing there that was really terrible. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please like it down here. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. My question of the day is, what is your favorite wine below $30 US? Comment down below. Let me know. I hope I see you guys again very soon. Until then, stay thirsty.